In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Family, we gather at the intersection of purpose, power, and possibility. America in Black and White has always been a space where truth meets testimony, where we honor the journeys of those who refuse to shrink in the face of adversity and instead choose to rise, lead, and transform the world around them. Our guest this evening embodies that spirit. He is a man who has lived multiple lives, the disciplined grind of professional sports, the heart-centered calling of education, and the mission-driven work of equity and human dignity. His story is not just about achievement, it's about alignment. It's about what happens when a Black man decides that his life's work will be rooted in justice, empathy, and the unwavering belief that every human being deserves to be seen, valued, and uplifted. Tonight, we welcome a leader who has carried the lessons of the field into the classroom, the boardroom, and the community. A strategist, a mentor, a builder of people, a champion of inclusion, and a brother who committed to leaving the world better than he found it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Terrell McMoore. Hello, sir.
Thank you, Charles. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the introduction.
Yes, sir. So before we get into the show, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience?
Uh, it's just that I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to an informative show.
We appreciate you for being here. And let me get right on into it then. We're going to start with, I want to get the audience familiar with you to learn your life journey and your roots. And can you tell us what was life like growing up, and who were the earliest influences that shaped your worldview?
Yeah, thank you. What was it like growing up? Well, I'm from South Minneapolis, right in the heart of the city. I grew up in a family full of educators, people that really took education serious. And, what it was like for me growing up, it was pretty good. To be completely honest, I had a lot of friends. I loved being outside, first and foremost, hanging out with my friends and doing things outside, sports and anything outside, to be completely honest. And people who helped shape me, to be completely honest, is, my family, my grandfather and my dad, my uncles, my mom, my sisters, my brother. And, they were people that I could always lean on. My grandfather was pretty much a pioneer in some of the equity work in terms of Title IX with sports and in the Black community as a leader in terms of some of the social justice stuff that he would do and some of the advocacy work that he would do at the educational level. So he was a really big influence on me. He was also a Minnesota Gopher. He boxed and he played football for the University of Minnesota, one of the first Black athletes that was a dual sport athlete at the University of Minnesota. So that was something that I always looked up to and kind of strived to want to shoot for, to be, an athlete and also somebody that was looked to for mentorship and guidance. So, like my grandfather was very, very, very big in, paving the way for some of the opportunities that I've had, and also just the mindset and the worldview that I had. or that I have.
When you look back at your childhood, what moments built the resilience you carry today?
Uh, honestly, I might, I want to say my father, my dad, because everything that I did, it could always be better, and in terms of, the way that I chose to communicate with people is something that comes to the forefront of my mind, the words that I choose to use, but also in terms of just working hard for anything that you want. And, he was very, very stern at times, but also very, very, very understanding. So, my father had a big role in that, in just the maturation and just the type of person that I am today, that, cares about other people. They want, you want to see other people do well. If you have keys to the car, you're going to teach people how to drive it instead of holding on to the keys and trying to, not provide access. So that was a lot of my upbringing. What can you do for other people? Because there's a lot of people that's helped me, that's helped my family get to the point where, we were. And it's something that's always been on the front of my mind. And it's just something that's, woven within the tapestry of who I am, to be able to give back, and also to, work hard and, be a person that wants to lead.
Okay. So, how did your family shape your understanding of leadership and responsibility?
My dad was my head coach all the way until I had got to high school. So, although it was little league, he instilled, and also my grandfather, talking about what it means to be a leader, and mainly leading by example, first and foremost. You don't have to be the loudest rah rah guy, but if you're the person that's working hard, and, people see that you're working hard, oftentimes that translate into people wanting to, maybe mock some of the things that you're doing if they see that you're being successful in your pursuits. My mom had it, in the grit instilled in me, with just being, my mom worked in education as a teacher for a long time, short stint in administration. And, you know, they had guided me very well in terms of making sure that, you take your education seriously, because that's going to be a catalyst that's going to help open doors, and also, provide, insight and direction to, the calling of life, whatever it may be. And so I would say my parents had a lot to do with, the resiliency and sports, to be completely honest. I've always been a high competitor. I love competing in anything. I always want to win. I always felt like I could win, regardless of who I was up against or what the challenges were. I always felt like I could come out on top. And it is something that, transfers over into life very well. But the resiliency part came into, a lot, is just how I was raised, as being a black man. When, I got two black parents, and they let you may have to work, and most likely you're gonna have to work two times as hard just to get half as far. So, that's something that I've just always worn on my sleeve, and something that I've always taken seriously, and I've always wanted to work hard. So that's something that's always been, something that came naturally for me. And, being the person that I was and playing football, you have to have a sense of resiliency, because you're always going to go against somebody that's bigger than you, that's stronger than you, that may be faster than you. So, you have to figure out ways to overcome that and be successful still, without making any excuses, and just finding a way. So, sports and, my family's mentality is what really shaped the resiliency.
Wow. So with that solid foundation, because it's like you were blessed to be as rounded as you are, to have that kind of foundation. How do you take from what you learned as a child, and as the leader that you are, that you're able to transcend over to the students and the kids that you teach today? How are you able to carry that over?
Well, I've had a lot of good mentors growing up,
Mhm.
educators. I've always been a person that looked at school where I was excited to go to school for the most part. Now, there's sometimes in high school, you may not want to go to school, but overall, generally speaking, I always had a good experience at in school. So that enabled me to be more vulnerable, I suppose, in terms of, you know, asking for more help, or teachers or administrators, whoever it may be, maybe going a little bit out of their way to make sure that you have what you need to be successful. So when it came time for me to walk away from professional sports and find a career, it started with my mom saying, like, you really don't have a ton of work experience other than playing sports, working hard, and doing hard things in terms of athletically. And it was in the off seasons of going in between the Arena Football League. You have time off during the school year, so I would have a job. I'm working, and you know it is not something that I saw myself doing, working in education, to be completely
Mhm.
honest. But it's something that came organically, and it's something that I ended up having a calling to, because I had worked in my first job at the school that I had graduated from, at Washburn High School. And some of the people that I was working with were some of the people that were mentors to me, and also my teachers, some administrators. And I really enjoyed it, to be completely honest. And I didn't know that I would have a gift to be able to bridge gaps as well as I did with students and education. But it was something that right away, within the first couple days, I had found out that I really was good at it, because for whatever reason, students would want to, listen to what I have to say. And this is before they'd have no idea who I even was. I'm just the new face in the classroom or whatever. And I had a lot of people that, showed me the way, and gave me a roadmap. So that's something that, I feel obligated to do. And it's something that I'm really good at. So it came totally through, I don't know, by the grace of God or something, because I got my undergrad in psychology and exercise science with a minor in coaching. So I thought I was going to just coach, to be completely honest. And it was some of my coaches in college, and also a couple of them in high school, had said, Terrell, if you ever thought about coaching, I think you would make a good coach, because for one, you care a lot. And for two, you want to know the X's and O's of the football, and like you like to teach it, and you like to learn stuff about that. So it's something that just resonates with me, and it's something that I've just always had a natural ability to do.
So, do you think, having the ability to adapt to all the different personalities from your team, learning what it is to team build, establishing camaraderie and the relationships to strengthen the areas in which you were in? Do you think that contributed to how you are making the strong path and relationships with your kids that you work with today?
Yes, 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 absolutely. When I was studying psychology and coaching and seeing how to relate with students to make the biggest impact, there's a lot of transferable skills between all of those. And the personalities, and being on a football team, for example, and going to college and having such a culture shift of growing up in South Minneapolis and going to a place like Cedar Falls, Iowa, where there's not a lot of people that look like me and you learn about other people's cultures, and you learn about what the culture is. And that's something that's always kind of fascinated me, to learn about people's cultures, and their best practices, or the everything about their cultures. And I feel like that had prepared me to be able to build bridges between cultures, because on a football team, or if you're working in a school and you're working with students, faculty, staff, whatever it is, you're going to have a big melting pot of, different type of worldviews, different type of cultural experiences, different type of cultural norms. And it's something that's always kind of fascinated me, because I've always liked to learn and know about how people think, or why people think the certain ways that they do, or why people have the beliefs that they do. And being intrigued with that at such a younger age has been something that has opened my purview, I suppose, more than some people at just a younger age, because some people don't care about what other people think or feel or anything like that. That's just something that, had always had a calling to me for whatever reasons, to be able to know, how do I navigate through this world with the least amount of it's hard to say, put into words, I guess, because like, you have to know to navigate different rooms and situations. And I always felt like the more insights you know about, different cultural perspectives or worldviews, or, pedagogy, whatever it may be, you're going to be more well equipped to be successful. So that's something that I've always wanted to take an interest in. And it wasn't until I got into education where the advocacy part came in to play for, other people and other cultures.
Again, because now what I find to be so fascinating though is I think you're like the perfect example of someone that really cares, and you say, as they say, you put your money where your mouth is. And so it is, you came from the community, you're back in the community, building the community. Why do you care so much?
I care so much because I like to see people like me and you, or people that even may come from the same type of socioeconomic situation in the areas that I come from. I want to see them be successful, because a lot of times in my life growing up, people will tell you what you can't do. And for whatever reasons, I was always just like, okay, and just, take it with a grain of salt and just let it roll off my shoulder. And to the point where growing up, people would tell me that I was, too confident. I'm conceited. I'm all of these things, just because I was very confident in my own abilities and myself and my ability to be able to perform. And, I think it just comes from people helping me, people helping me and showing me the rope. And it's something where it's very fulfilling for myself. When you help a young person get a scholarship, or you help a person write a resume that leads them to landing a job that they wanted, even though it may just be, bagging the groceries at your local Super Value or your local grocery store, or whatever it is. Seeing people reach their goals and knowing that I had a little bit to do with that is something that was very rewarding for me, because I know there have been people in my life outside of my family that have provided me that same luxury. So it's something that I really enjoy doing, because oftentimes where I'm working with athletes, or it may even be like a coworker or something, I'm oftentimes some of the first people that are outside of their family that tell them that they could do it. Like you can absolutely do it. And you just want to have a plan, because you don't want to have like what Herm Edwards says, and this is something that I really believe in, and I tell, my football players stuff this all the time. If you're having a dream without a plan, all you're doing is wishing. You're just wishing. So you always have to have a plan, and you always have to have a dream, but you need to have a roadmap to understand what are the levels and the steps that I need to take to achieve that dream. And I've always been somebody that is there to want to help people create that map and help them take those steps that they need to be able to get to where they want to go.
Does sports play in your identity as a young Black man?
I feel like if you were to ask me this 10 or 15 years ago, I felt like that was my whole identity, to be completely honest, because that's what people knew me as. People knew me as an identical twin, and they knew me as a guy that was kind of decent in football. Like, hold on, I've seen you before. I've heard your name before. So it was my total identity growing up, and all the way through college, all the way through my very first years in full-on adulthood, which I call the real world, it was an athlete, and it wasn't until I had got into education and I went back to school, I got my master's, and I started developing and having a career in education, where I saw myself more so as a mentor than I am as an athlete or anything like that. And now, the athletic part is a good platform. It gives you a good platform of people that, may know who you are. It comes with a little bit of credibility. And it also lets people know that you're willing to work harder than most people are to get something that you want. Because in order to get to the level to play professional athletes, the number one thing that I have to say to get there is that you're just willing to work harder than people. That's it. Like, you're willing to work harder than the next boy, girl, whoever it is that you're going to be going up against. And that's something that has always just been instilled with me. Like, if you want it, you got to go out there and work for it. And so I'm not sure if I got off track on that one or not.
Oh, no,
CK, my bad.
no, you're fine. You're fine. I mean, because I'm more than sure that as the audience is listening to this, that I'm sure that everything that you said was very much so relatable, because it got me to thinking back to when I was much younger as well. And in just thinking about this, you know, um, loving sports and playing sports, I think that was just kind of like the thing that a lot of us just did, and it just was like one of those natural things, or either, like you say, your dad, your granddad, or you had somebody that was doing some type of sport, that when it happened and when your time came around, you had to keep going. And so
Yeah.
when I think about that, and so this is kind of like, how, and just think what you said, how it relates to where I was, is that, I was sitting there and I actually had doubts. Okay. And so I think it was my having doubts that stopped my football playing days, because I not only played football, I played tennis, I ran track, I played baseball. And when I hurt my knee, that kind of like, it was like, oh, okay, well, I can do something else. And so,
Yeah.
so I kind of transitioned to playing other sports and still kept it going, but still the love for football was there. But when I think about where I am now, you just kind of like put something back in my mind to make me think, like, okay, you know, pretty much everything I do, I look at it from a competitive nature, because I always feel like I got to be the best.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's something that's just in some people, and if you want to, the driving force of competitiveness is something that people don't realize that they have until they're being competitive, and somebody's being like, oh, well, no, you're being too competitive or something. Because it could be like, a timeline, for example, like you got a paper that you need to do or whatever. And, if you're a really competitive person, you're probably not going to be procrastinating it, because you're going to want to do a good job. But yeah, sport is a great teacher of a lot of stuff, and always, and a lot of times it's very humbling for people, because you'll find out, things that you do or don't want to do through sport. Like, maybe I don't like working really hard physically. Maybe I don't like competing against other people. Maybe I don't like when somebody's telling me that I got to get better at X, Y, and Z, because I feel like this person's better than you right now. A lot of people can't take that stuff, especially when you're younger and you throw in an unfortunate situation of getting an injury or something, like you hurting your knee. That could be catastrophic, depending on how your experience has been leading up to that point into the sport. Because if it's kind of something like, how like some of the students and kids that I coach, it's like, oh, my dad's making me play football to make me tougher or whatever it is. And, it's something that you either, like you love to do or you don't, so when there's people and kids that I coach and they say, hey coach, like I want to be really good. Like I want to go and play professionally like you did, like how can I get there? The first thing I ask them is, how much do you love this? Like, do you love it? Because I be hearing you complaining sometimes at practice. And it's okay to complain at practice sometimes. Practice is hard. Nobody wants to practice all the time. Allen Iverson, you like practice, right? So we get it, right? Like everybody gets it. But, you got to love it for real, because it's going to come with, a lot of humbling experiences of saying you're not good enough, you're not big enough, you're not strong enough, you don't weigh enough, you're not, who knows? Like your skills not there. I feel like you're not smart enough. It could be a whole slew of things, and it's about being resilient, and it's about having that confidence in yourself, and that's something that I've been a person that instills in other people is that confidence that you can do whatever you want to do. You just have to believe it in your heart that you can do it, and then you got to go and make it happen. And a lot of people need a lot of coaching and a lot of strategic planning to do that, because something that I talk about a lot to younger people is being great by choice. And that's choosing to make great decisions in everything that you do, whether it's the way that you show up, whether it's the way that you communicate with people, it's the way that you treat people, it's the way that you compete, it's the way that you put in effort, and, I feel like if you want to be a successful athlete or a successful educator or successful in any way of life, you have to have a certain level of resiliency. You have to be able to take some critical feedback to grow, and you have to be able to not take things personally. And that's something I try to instill through coaching, and something that everybody that I work with is something that I try to keep at the forefront to continue to grow, is by not taking things personally and continue to look forward and not, look at all of the shortcomings that you may have, because everybody's going to have them. It's how do you respond to those?
So was there a defining moment when you realized you were called to lead?
Yes. Yep. Yes, there absolutely was. I was in college, and we were having some difficulties with people showing up into the weight room. And so our head strength and conditioning coordinator at the time had gave a proposal to people and said, does anybody have an idea that we can come up with that's going to make, guys show up to lifting, and make it more accountable, instead of saying, I'm going to lift on my times, and, because we wanted to lift as a unit and have more of a cohesive group. So what I did was, me and my brother took it upon ourselves to go home like that night, and over the next 2 nights, we created this system of accountability that basically took every week that we would lift as a game week into the following season, and it would be like every day there would be like you get points and stuff like that, and at the end of the week you either beat the team or not. And that was my first taste of real leadership in terms of a big group, and something that I did that the coaches and the strength and conditioning coordinator took it and ran with it. We did that for 4 years, and we had some of the best teams that we ever had at Northern Iowa once that was implemented. So that was the first taste of leadership that I had ever had. And then it came into volunteer coaching at a school called Waterloo East I was at, where I didn't know that if I was coaching that, young people would look up to me so much, because I'm at Northern Iowa, I'm playing football and I'm thinking it's cool and all, but I didn't realize that, people or young guys in high school would look up there and be like, I want to get to where you're at right now. So everything that I was talking to these kids about, it was like the Bible to them. And I was like, wow, okay, these kids are really listening and doing everything that I'm saying right now. And then they'd come watch some of the games and stuff, give them tickets, and, just seeing how big of an impact it was of somebody like me just talking to him, and I was just a college athlete at the time, but seeing how impressionable they were, and them seeing me as a mentor really is something that I really really gravitated to, and really liked, and really take seriously in terms of wanting to lead the right way, and making sure that the young people that do look up to me and want to strive to get to where I've got, I'm doing a pretty good job of exempling that for them.
How did your experience in predominantly white spaces shape your sense of self and purpose?
Man, that's a great that is a great question. You know what? In almost a lot of the areas that I have worked in, and even in terms of, you know, coaching in college, and or going to school in college, or even being in the rooms, in the professional rooms, and seeing the coaches and the GMs and everybody like that, it's always been a very predominantly white space, and it helped me find my voice, to be completely honest, because there's always opportunity to advocate, whether it be a stereotype that's being perpetuated or something, whether it be you know a lack of cultural understanding. It has really gave me a purpose, I suppose, and an avenue where I would be working for places that take this type of stuff seriously, where they don't want to have any type of cultural misunderstandings and stuff like that. And honestly, when I was in college and stuff, I didn't even know there were avenues like this. It wasn't until I went back to graduate school to get my master's degree, which has a little bit of an emphasis on equity and leadership, that I knew, or that I understood, that there was such a calling for this type of work, and there wasn't a lot of people doing it. And to this day, there's still not a ton of people that's doing it, especially in the light of, the new politics and everything like that. It's kind of like a fart in the wind almost, and it is something that it's important work, and me being in spaces with all people that don't look like me for the most part was very difficult at first, to be completely honest, because it's hard not to take things personally when people are talking about a group of people that I am, or there may be like worldviews, or bias that's being projected onto people, and then there's people that don't even understand that they're doing that. So it's something that has given me an understanding of just humanity, and of how people think, and how they're raised. Because oftentimes when somebody's maybe offending somebody, or there's advocacy that needs to happen, oftentimes the people that are offending the people aren't even aware of their bias or their microaggressions or anything like that, and it's met with a I would never, I wouldn't ever mean to do that. And then it leans into a conversation of intent versus impact. But then you have to, you have to unravel all of these things. It's like an onion, because you can't go too fast, because then they're going to be like, hold on, Terrell, you're calling me a racist. And then as soon as you start saying stuff like that, you've lost them. Because then they're going to be like, okay, he thinks I'm a racist. He doesn't think I can learn. And like, it is, being in those rooms had let me know that I'm pretty fearless, first and foremost, too, because I'm the type of person, if somebody's doing something to somebody, I'm not the type of person that's just going to ignore it and just let it go. I'm going to advocate, and I'm going to speak up, so it's something that is important to me.
How do you prepare your kids that are under you right now? How do you prepare them for those situations?
I prepare them for those situations by teaching them over and over what it means to be great by choice, slowing down and thinking about the decisions that you're going to make. Because when you look like us, sometimes somebody might want to lead you into saying something so they can be like, I got you. Or, and then use it against you somehow, some way. So, when it comes to, teaching the younger group and even, men that I work with that, that we're, just having conversations with is, you always have to be very cognizant of your words that you're using. And you always want to slow down and be great by choice, because if you're not being a great decision maker and you end up saying some things that you wish that you didn't say, some of that stuff can follow you for a long, long time. So when I'm working with young people that look like me and you, and even when people that don't look like me and you, I always take the opportunity to say, hey, understand, have some respect for yourself and others. And if you're feeling, some type of way about something and it's going to be provocative, like, maybe it might not be the right time and the place. So just teaching young people about, social norms and when are appropriate times and what is that appropriate relationship that you need to have before you can even enter a conversation like that, because oftentimes if you're, you come off too strong something, people will be like, I'm done with you, the cancel culture in American society right now is so real. It's something that it could get hard to combat. If you say something, you put your mouth, that could follow you for. Young people nowadays, they have a pretty good understanding of that. So when I'm sitting there saying, like, be careful what you're saying, and don't let somebody have you fall for the okie doke saying something like, oh yeah, who knows what it may be, right? But always letting them to understand that everybody doesn't always have your best interests in mind. So you always got to understand and approach some type of conversations like that, unless it's like you're really good friend, somebody you've known for 20 years or something like that. But you always got to have your head on a swivel.
Oh yeah. So let's transition over to your NFL and professional sports experience. Walk us through your journey as a professional football player, and what did that grind look like?
It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, and the thing that I talk to about people who are interested in hearing this type of thing, but it's really like my wife lately, and it hasn't, I don't talk about it a whole lot because that's not how I definitely identify myself anymore, but that is a part of my identity. It was tough. It was really tough, to be completely honest. I grew up dreaming to go to the NFL. Even people like my dad was like, okay, you're crazy. Like, only 0.7% of all athletes are gonna make it to that level. And I always took that as a challenge. Like, oh, okay, so I guess I'm gonna be the 0.7. So how it went was, me and my brother, I have an identical twin brother. We both played corner, which is, stopping the receivers from scoring touchdowns. And we had scholarship offers, and it came down to going to Northern Iowa, where we both got scholarships, and played there. I was a co-captain my senior year for a couple games, and had a great career. I did well. I was an all-conference selection my senior year. Had an agent, and it had came down to either signing a contract with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at the time in this Canadian Football League, or taking a free agent contract as a free agent contract within the NFL. And there was a couple of teams. There was the Vikings, the Bears. I can't remember. There were like 4 or 5 teams that I could have had a free agent contract with. And, me being from Minnesota, I'm like, that's where I want to go. If I have the opportunity to sign on a dotted line for the Minnesota Vikings, that's absolutely going to be something that I want to do. And that's something that I had told my agent. So the opportunity had presented itself. I thought I was going to get drafted, to be completely honest, in the later rounds. It didn't happen. So I was kind of salty when, your name doesn't get called and you're watching all these people go. And then my phone ended up ringing probably a couple hours later with a Minnesota number, and I was pretty excited about it. So what happened was I got a free agent what was it, a rookie camp invite. That's where it started. I got invited to be able to go to a number of rookie camps just to showcase your skills, to show that, are you, like, are you worthy, basically, and I chose to go with the Vikings. And at the time, they had one of the best secondaries in the NFL. I was a person that didn't do research back then. I'm looking at the teams. I'm just like, okay, Minnesota, let's go. I wasn't looking at the best opportunity for me to actually make the team. That's like, that's where I messed up at. But I was so excited. Like, wow, here's the opportunity actually here. So I went to a rookie camp. Did pretty well there, and ended up having a little stint with the practice squad. And that year was the fastest year of my life, to be completely honest, because you feel like you're on the team, but you're really not on the team. Like you're within but without. That's the saying that I like to say. Like, you're within, like you're there, it's cool, like, oh wow, all right, these are the guys, like, I'm competing, yes, I'm on the team, but you're really not a whole lot on the team. You're just a full-on punching bag, which was fine for a little bit, but then it starts kind of eating up at your ego a little bit, because you're not making all this money. Somebody may be making the money you're making all year in one paycheck. And for me, for somebody like me, that did something to me when I was younger, and I'm sitting there being in the locker room. I'm like, I'm working just as hard as these guys. And, it kind of diminished the fact that I had got there, and that, I still had work to do, and, some people can lose that vision, and it was a tough road to get there of just, working harder than everybody. So then I ended up getting cut, and I ended up getting picked up real fast by the New England Patriots. And then I was released after about a month from them. And then I played in the Arena Football League for a team called the Billings Outlaws, which is in Billings, Montana. Then from Billings, I went back to Iowa, played for a team in Iowa called the Sioux City Bandits. And then from the Sioux City Bandits, I had signed my last contract in the AFL for a team called the Oklahoma City Yard Dogs, which was in the AFL. And then they transferred and became, the Oklahoma City Bricktown Brawlers or something like that. I forget. And that was the last team that I had played for before saying, you know what? I'm not making a ton of money here in the AFL, and now it is like you're getting paid. It is professional sports, but when you're on that small field and you see people almost breaking their necks out there, and I was a person that didn't want to break my neck, and I got tired of they're always bringing somebody in. There's always going to be somebody coming in to compete for your spot. And so you're competing every single week for that spot, and it's something that, I loved at first for the first couple of years. Like, yeah, I'm in here, like, okay, I'm used to this beating everybody out, but then, as you get older and, the checks get smaller for me, I was like, I feel like, I have a degree. There's an opportunity for me to be able to make this type of money without playing sports and without having to sacrifice my body. So it was a really, really, really cool experience that a lot of people don't get the chance to say that they had. But it takes a lot of work. And one thing that it did do was have a good start to my younger adult life, I suppose. Because it does open up doors and opportunities in terms of, people wanting to get to know you, or you getting to know other people that you may never have had an opportunity to cross paths with. And I kind of alluded to it earlier. It brings a little credibility that, the person that's going to work hard, you can focus on something, you can take professional feedback in terms of growing. And it's an honor that I hold dearly to, and it's something that when I do talk about it, the number one thing I think of being within, but being without, because you're on the team, but I'm still looking for a job when the season's over. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what did the NFL teach you about teamwork, pressure, and performance?
Ah, it taught me that you have to be able to balance all of that. It told me it taught me that the only thing that matters is what your last play was and what your next play is gonna be. It taught me that you have to continue to be wanted. You have to continue to sharpen your skills. You have to continue to want to be at the top of your game in order to stay where you're at. And that's something that, I carry over into life and my career and my professional um, work is, you always want to stay on top of the ball and you want to always stay ready so you don't have to get ready, and that's something that it taught me where when your name's called, you have to be ready, like you can't be unprepared. You can't be, asking, okay, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, it taught me that you have to be locked and loaded at all times because you don't ever want to get caught off guard. Because if you're caught off guard in those situations, you're done. Like, you're out. Like, the type of guy that I was always right on the verge of being cut. You can't give anybody any reason to let you go. And that's something that it taught me. And that's something that I try to instill in, younger people that I work with. Don't ever give people a reason to make it easy to, part ways with you, or, make it easy to be like, okay, yeah, he's not the one that we want to hire, or, he's not the starter. You got to make it hard for people by showing up, being consistent, and being a good person, because, about half of the guys that's in the NFL, I feel like they have that just uncanny God-given ability of being bigger, stronger, faster than, and just being more athletic than people. But the thing that other people, most people don't realize is a lot of those guys are genuinely good people, first and foremost, like people you can trust stuff with. And the other one is that they're smart. Like the people are pretty smart, being able to understand the X's and O's and being able to make decisions under high pressure really fast. Like it's a very unique type of person that can, transfer those skills and being able to high pressure. And it's very, 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 very like the fastest pace that you could think of and being able to keep up with it. So like the things that it taught me is, don't take things personally, and that's something that I already knew. But when you got somebody cussing you out, talking about that you're just on the practice squad, it's hard to take things. It's hard not to take it personally, to be completely honest. But that's something that it teaches you by way of force. Because if you want to stay there, if you're in the position that I am, that you're not making millions of dollars, and you're not that number one draft pick, you're not gonna go in there and telling the coach where he could. Like what he could do.
Did you navigate the mental and emotional demands of professional sports?
It helped me a lot that I had my identical twin brother with me, somebody that I trusted a lot. We were fortunate enough to always play on the same teams. And it was really a blessing from God that professionally we're able to continue that streak, and he helped a lot with the just the mental capacity of it, and being able to have go home and talk to somebody every single day that's there and seeing the experience right there with you, and just being able to talk through it with you, and us being soundboards for each other, being like sometimes like it's you're gonna have tough days. Like you're gonna have tough days in professional athletes, whether it's an injury, whether it's there's a concept or a scheme that you may have a hard time trying to grasp because is new to you, and you're feeling like you may not be able to learn it or whatever it may be. It's something that teaches you to always continue to work hard and continue to be open to learning new stuff. And when you have the mindset of you don't know it all and you're here and you want to learn and you want to continue to learn and grow, it makes the mental load a little less and a little easier to bear. But at the same time, it's just something that you got to learn to do. And by the time, if you're fortunate enough to make it to the professional ranks, you're pretty solid in terms of mental capacity by then, because you've been yelled at before, you've been told you have things that you need to work on. And having my brother there with me helped a lot, though, to be completely honest, because I'm a very internal person. I don't turn to social media. I don't call my mom or my dad a whole lot and be like, hey, this is what happened. I'm feeling bad for myself or whatever. I'm very internal, and ever since I met my wife, she's somebody that I open up to. But other than that, it would always been just my brother, and I was very fortunate that he was there along the way with me every step of the way, because there were times where I wasn't performing as well as I could have been. And it's because I was dealing with a little bit of an injury and he was performing quite well. And, he was giving me the resilience of being like, dude, like, you're going to be all right. Like, you got almost a blown out hamstring, just be good, ice it, get yourself back right. And, we did a lot to make sure we're both supporting each other's mental.
When you mentioned you had your brother on the same team,
Mm-hmm.
when you guys sit back and talk sometimes, do you ever talk about those times where you tell him or you express to him how important it was that he was there with you when you had the down moments?
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't told him this in a while, so he's watching right now. So I tell him now how much I appreciate it. I hadn't told him in a while, but yeah, the bond that an identical twin has with their twin is like no other, and only identical twins would know what I'm talking about. But I have let him know, and more so like when we're going through it, and when we sit down and we talk and we reminisce through some things sometimes, and yeah, it's like, dude, thank you for that help, and we've leaned on each other in different ways to be able to get to where we're at right now. But yeah, I have always let them know, thank you. And something that I could do a better job of is let my parents know that, because they did a lot of sacrificing for me to get to where I am right now too. And to get to where I was even in those situations with my brother, just down there, just, going through the fire through by ourselves and just learning it. And, it's something that's how my parents raised me though, to be able to, figure it out on your own. Like, you're smart enough, like you can figure out problems. Like, you don't need to call me for every single thing. Figure this stuff out. And if you really, really, really need the help, call me and I'm gonna help you. But I want you to figure this out on your own, and that's where I feel like just the problem solving and the resiliency came from, because, my parents would help me, absolutely. But they were absolutely in the same breath, like, you're figuring this out on your own. I was one of the kids that had to, kind of learn the hard way, because, mom or dad would be like, don't do that. And I'm like, I can do that. I'm going to try to jump over across this, and you fall and crack your head, and you're like, okay, maybe I should have listened. I should have listened to them. But I was that type of person where I had to learn through my own experiences, other than somebody telling me what I can and can't do. So when it was coming on them shortfalls or, having those hard days, yeah, sitting back and, having my brother there. And when we're reminiscing on it, we kind of look back sometimes, and like, we look back and say, like, I'm happy that we were there pushing each other, because if I didn't have another person right there, nipping on my heels, that I continue, because the thing that kind of propelled me into wanting to be great too is I always wanted to be better than him, and he always wanted to be better than me. So if I see him working, I'm like, I'm not gonna let him outwork me, and he's like, I'm not gonna let him outwork me. So then we just out here just going at it all day, and that's kind of the competitiveness. And if you ever, and we also had another friend, a guy by the name of Quincy Avery, who was a high level competitor, and us three would be playing, like we'd play football, like and compete against each other all the time, to the point where we'll fight each other, get upset at each other. I hate you. I'm never coming back over here. I can't stand you. Throw the football at the back of his head. Get on your bike right away, crying like, I ain't never coming back here. And then a couple of days later, you call it like, hey, mom, is Quincy there? Can I talk to Quincy? So it's having because I would call him sometimes too. He was a really good friend of mine. So when it came to that mental load and things, when I was feeling like I was getting overwhelmed, I had a real small group of people, so there wasn't a lot of people that I call on, to be completely honest. But so I was very, very grateful that I knew I had two people that I could call on that were my age, that I grew up with, they played sports, and they'd understand what I was going through. And half the time, the conversations you go like, dude, just keep your head up. Why are you feeling bad about yourself? Like, who cares? Bad things are gonna happen. Everything's not gonna be easy. You got to keep going though. You can't quit. Because the moment you quit, it's done then.
That's where I think a lot of our kids today are missing the ability to know what it is, or to have just an inkling of an idea of how to critically think. Your parents let you think and critically think those situations to work them out. That is the way I think the majority of us from a particular time frame, we were taught that way. You got to figure that out, okay? Only if you get to the point where you just totally just you about to fall off the mountain. Okay, let me come rescue you.
Correct.
Because you have to figure that out now, because kids are not allowed to critically think. That's kind of like a problem. So, like, just in situations like that, are you seeing that with any of your kids that you coach?
Absolutely. And like, one of my main things that I say when I'm coaching, or I'm working with young people, or I'm working with somebody that looks up to me, and I feel like I have some nuance for them, is one of the things that separates me as a coach compared to some other coaches, other than knowing the X's and O's and everybody, they care about their students and stuff like that, is honestly, I teach these young people how to think, not what to think. Like, how do you critically think? When somebody's saying this to you, what is your thought process? What are you thinking? If somebody says, hey, you know what's going on in the world today, we need that. Like, we need ice in here or something like that. Like, whatever it may be, right? What are you thinking about that? Like, and how are you thinking about that, right? Because oftentimes a young person, they're going to give you a knee-jerk reaction and being like, whatever it may be. And now guess what? That goes back into the twofold of being like, was that great by choice? You telling somebody where they could go state something? Was that being great in that moment? Nah, it really wasn't. So teaching them how to think, and a lot of the process of how to think starts with the very first understanding of having the presence of mind to just pause.
Yes.
Just pause and think about what you want to say. Think about that question that they just asked you. Is that a landmine question, or is that an underhanded softball home run question that they asked you, that they just set up for you, So that's one of the, the separators in terms of me being an educator and a coach and doing it successfully, is getting young people and people in general, getting them to know how to think, not what to necessarily think. If somebody's calling you a racist or something, why is that? Somebody's calling me a racist or something for whatever reason. Why are they calling me that? Like, what did I do? Like, for real? And maybe think inside. am I? Like, I don't think I am, right? So it's just starting to what to think. And it starts with pausing and not getting offended, because oftentimes when it comes with disagreements and in those heavy conversations, it's usually somebody felt disrespected down the line, and they're just you got two people just trying to get them to believe each side instead of just meeting in the middle and be like, hey, like let's just let's agree to disagree here, and let's do that professionally. And I'm still gonna respect you as a human being, but I just don't agree with with that ideology or that worldview you may have. And right now, I feel like in society, and not just young people, as an American society, we have a hard time doing that. Yes. Just agree, agreeing to disagree. Like, it's okay that people have other, worldviews and opinions than you. Mm-hmm. It's exactly. Not about debunking every single thing all the time, because somebody like me, I'm an honest believer in some type of things that, people get paid to put some of that stuff out there, and when you're talking about stuff with us in Black America, we're going to tell you about, oh yeah, like you need to go get this vaccine. You need to get this shot because this is going to save you. And the next thing you know, you got all these Black men out here falling out, dying because, like you don't believe something somebody told you. But, that's just me. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist or nothing like that. But I am a person that believes, like, you can't believe everything that you hear and say because, people get paid to say some of this stuff. Like, but that's for another, that's for another time.
Yes, sir. So let's get more into, though, your coaching and your athletic leadership. So what inspired you to become a coach after your playing career?
Wow. Coaches telling me that I'd make a good coach. And also my dad being my coach growing up until I got to high school. So it's something that I grew up around. My grandfather was a coach. My uncle was my wife's basketball coach, middle school basketball coach. So I've always been around coaches, around men that coach. And it's something that I looked up to. It's something that, like when my dad was coaching me, like I wanted to be a coach. I was like, I want to be a coach one day. And, once I got to high school, I thought, I got in good with some of my coaches and I had really good relationships and good personal relationships with them, mentor type relationships. And outside of, I never had a lot of role models that I felt like that I was watching on TV. Like I never looked at a football player and said, hey, like, I want to play like that guy, or I want to be like this guy. I just had people that were doing stuff that I thought was cool, and I didn't even realize that they were being role models to me until way after the fact, until I was an adult, being like, hold on, I used to look at my coaches as role models. I didn't necessarily look at the NFL players or, the Gopher players that I'd meet and be around as like the role models for me. Yes, I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't look at them and be like, let me follow in all of their footsteps. So it was always the coaches, because they were the first ones to tell me that I could do stuff other than like, my mom. They would be the ones instilling that confidence, like, dude, you're faster than, you're fast. Like, you can jump high. Like, you're aggressive. Like, dude, go try tackling that guy high. You don't need to tackle him low every time. Go tackle him and just go keep your head up. And then you go out there and you smack somebody tackling them high. You're like, okay, I guess I can do this. So then, they were the confidence builders in me. So then when it comes to me coaching, that's what I love to be, because I love seeing, the light click in a kid's head and be like, oh, okay. And now they understand the back pedal, or they understand the scheme of why we're running this, or why you blitz the A gap, or whatever it is. And being able to teach those life lessons, and also just being somebody that, gives young people the keys to being successful, and that's working hard, being a good person, being somebody that somebody can trust, and, honest, and obviously being competent in whatever, you want to do. You got to fully immerse yourself in that stuff. So when your name is called and your number is called, you are fully prepared to step up to the plate and hit a home run.
How do you approach coaching as a form of mentorship?
Because there's there's stuff that I would hear where you'd hear some athletes saying, if it, me being an athlete, I'm not a role model or I'm not a mentor, I'm just a professional athlete or whatever. And I always thought that was kind of funny because there's a little bit of truth to that. But you have to understand when you're in that position, that's part of what comes with it is the mentorship and being able to be a good role model. So being a coach and being a mentor, those are they kind of just come hand in hand, to be completely honest. And anybody that's a good coach, they have that just that, that calling, I guess, of saying that, I want to show people the right way to do something. I want to see you all get to where I'm at or better, surpass me, and when you have people that are like that, and most coaches that are good are like that, the mentorship is something that you value. That's something that I honor, and when I'm working with people's athletes and their parents, I always thank them, like, thank you for trusting me with the the care of your child, because I'm gonna do everything that I can to help them reach their goals. And it takes a lot for people to trust another adult with their child. With me with 3 kids now, I can understand what it would be like being like, all right, like you're gonna go get coached by this person, and knowing the level of trust that takes, and it is something that I've always honored, something that I've always held close to my heart, because when you do see the young person thrive and they're doing good and you see them playing on TV or something, and they send you a text message or they send you something, or you send them a text message like, bro, I just saw you on ESPN with that interception or whatever, or I saw you just get drafted, like that's super, super cool. And it's full circle moments is the reason why I do it too, and the reason that mentorship with coaching goes hand in hand. It's, the reason why you do it is because you care for people, and you do want to see people have their dreams come true. And whether that be just going playing Division III college football or, being a varsity starter at the varsity level in high school, whatever it may be, I've always been a person that enjoys seeing other people reach their goals. And if I was a person that had a little bit to do with it, then, that's fulfilling to me, and when it happens one time with one student, it's like a very addictive feeling. Like you want to do it for more people. Like you want more guys to get scholarships. You want more people to understand the nuances. You want to, you want to keep spreading your knowledge of the game, or just of how to be successful in life, of being great by choice. Because when you see young people adapting the lessons that you've taught them, that's something that goes far with me, and it lasts with me, and it makes me feel good.
To build a culture rather than just a team?
The first part cut out a little bit. It said, what do you need to do to build a culture and not just a team?
No, what does it mean to build a culture rather than just a team?
Building a culture is something that's gonna outlast you, like once you're gone, hopefully. Culture is a way of doing something, and whether it's a shift in culture or it's a whole newfound culture, building culture is the way that you're raising the bar, or you're setting the expectations of saying this is what it's gonna be. Right, this is the standard. It's not going to be nothing less than this. It'll never be less than this. It will be at the very minimum this. So in terms of like when I'm building the culture with a football team, like the first groundwork things you're going to do is being respectful to yourself and others, right? Building the culture, working hard, not complaining a whole lot, because everybody, you can always complain. Complaining never solves anything, and it doesn't, might make you feel good, but building culture is setting that standard. Building a team is, you're just building, everybody knows everybody's name and everybody knows what position that they play. That's a team. Everybody knows what they're, like where they are in the hierarchy, or, you're a starter, you're not a starter. Building the culture is, building something where people will see people not meeting the standard and helping them get to that standard. That's building a culture. Building a culture is not easy because it takes a lot of consistency, and it takes a lot of care, and it takes a lot of people that are on the same page, like-minded or not, but on the same page, moving in the same direction consistently, to have that culture start moving. And if you're going into a place that has a good culture, you know it right away. You feel it. It's energetic, it's electric usually, and you're like, okay, yeah, it feels good. When something is a bad culture, you also know that right away too. There's gossip, people are walking by each other in the hallways, and you're like, hold on, who? That person works here? Oh yeah, that's just how they are. That's just them. That's bad culture. And building culture and building a team, culture is something that's gonna last. And building a team, that's surface level. Culture stuff is stuff that, when people, the word of mouth is the culture. The stuff that you hear word of mouth, that's what the culture is. Like, oh, yeah, CZ, man, I love that guy, and that's word of mouth. That's good culture.
You coach young men through adversity?
Well, it depends on the type of adversity, first and foremost. If it's like the athletic adversity and you're upset about your playing time, or like whatever it may be, you teach them about life, and understanding that there's always going to be somebody that somebody thinks is better than you. So what their job is to do is to prove somebody wrong, and maybe even, prove yourself wrong a little bit, continue to work hard. So adversity is something that's always going to come. It's just, how are you going to respond to it? And that's how, in terms of the playing and athletically, is like, how are you going to respond to that adversity? In terms of real world stuff that happens, like if somebody had their friend that just got shot and killed, and they seen their friend get shot and killed, these are all experiences that I've had to work through with students and stuff, being very sympathetic and empathetic, being somebody that's listening first and foremost, not projecting anything that I've been through onto them, just being an authentic ear to listen to them and let them know that I'm there to help them in any way that I can. And, I would then ask if there's anything that I can do, like, hey, like, would you mind me giving you a little bit of feedback right now? Is like, are you okay with that? Or, would you mind if I shared with you maybe an approach that I had when, some of, a friend that I knew had got shot or whatever? And it's about meeting them where they are first and foremost, and, letting them know that I'm there in their corner. I want to help them through it, and that I may not have all the answers that they may ask me, but I would be willing to go and find those answers for them. And, thanking, the young person even coming and speaking to me to, want to help work through a situation. So it depends on what the adversity is. But if it's like life stuff, is always met with sympathy and empathy and listening first, and asking for permission to help instead of just thinking people want your help. Sometimes they just want you to listen, and that's it. Just listen, just be the soundboard, listen to all of this stuff that I'm going through, and thank you for being an ear. And then, other times some people do want some advice and be like, like, what am I supposed to do in these situations? And, I always approach those situations with, a lot of confidentiality first and foremost. You got to let them know that I'm not going to share anything. But, if it's a student, you do have to let them know your mandate reporter. So if it's something too bad, like I have to, like I have to tell somebody if you're talking about some type of harming anybody or something's gonna happen. But always with a lot of care and understanding, and listening first and foremost, turning your mouth off, opening up my ears, because when people are in a difficult spot and they have enough trust and confidence to come and speak to you about it, that's something that you should honor. And I would hope somebody that was being or being approached to give advice would abuse that and go against somebody's confidentiality and talk about something that they've been talking about. But yeah, it's approached with a lot of calmness, a lot of care, a lot of understanding and listening, and then that works oftentimes.
Let's talk a little bit about your education and equity work. What drew you into the world of education after athletics?
Not having a job, to be completely honest, and I didn't have a job. I didn't have no experiences, and that's where the first job offer came from. Like I had a little bit of experience in like business management and ownership, but it had came out of just a person calling me saying, "Hey, I think you'd be a great educator." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. Are you giving me a job?" And they're like, "Well, no, you still got to apply for it and everything." So the equity part of it, I never even knew I would be doing work in equity, to be equity and inclusion and human dignity and stuff like that. I didn't know about that type of stuff until I started working in education, and seeing a lot of gaps in terms of cultural responsiveness and, just equity work where, there wasn't a lot of access for, some type of students, and just finding, a need in terms of an avenue where I could help, to be completely honest. And for the longest time, I thought just, equity was making sure that you had enough like Black and brown people that was hired at a job. I didn't know it had so many nuances in terms of access, in terms of everything, socioeconomics of, in terms of equity, you could go down the list, right? So I was kind of catapulted into it just organically, to be completely honest, working in education, seeing there's some shortfalls, and it started with me being on an equity team at Thomas Edison High School, where I had got my first dean job, and I really liked the work that we were doing there. And then, I decided to go back and get my master's degree, and then it had a little bit of an emphasis in equity work there. And it was something about the advocacy and being able to provide more access for underrepresented communities that really, where I found my sweet spot, I suppose, with that in coaching, because oftentimes there's not a lot of people that look like me and you that were sitting in some of the rooms that I was sitting in terms of, district level leadership to executive level leadership to, a head coach to just being an administrator, to be completely honest. There's not a ton of people that look like us. So it was very eye-opening, I suppose, and I have always honored the opportunity and made sure that I'm making it not harder for somebody that looks like me that comes behind me, but instead I'm trying to open the door to make it a little bit easier. Like, okay, yeah, an ex-athlete, African American young man, they can come in and do a really good job at multiple different levels, and getting people to understand that there's a lot of transferable skills into high level athletics and education in terms of any type of work that you would do in the business world or consulting or wherever it may be, because you got to be able to know how to pivot and adjust and be able to produce results on short timelines.
So, how did your role as Dean of Students shape your understanding of student needs?
Big time, to be completely honest, because when I had first took over as a dean of students in my first dean role, you don't know what you don't know. So, there's a lot of nuance in those jobs, but having access to be able to meet with parents and being able to talk to students in a lot of one-on-one settings at the times of very shortcomings and when they're very vulnerable had let me know the importance of that work and the importance of the relationship building, and the relationship building in terms of being able to see a change in whether it be behavior, whether it just be the way somebody shows up, to be completely honest, because when the young people or people in general know that you care about them and you actually want to see them be successful, they'll believe in you. And like when you're guiding them, they'll listen to you. But if people don't know that you don't, or like if they don't think you care about them, they won't care about anything that you say. So being the dean had opened up my eyes to how to identify needs that people need in terms of maybe it's attention seeking, maybe it's in terms of access to materials or anything. It may be food, it could be anything. So it gave me access to be able to build more rapport with families and students, which then enables you to figure out the truth of what they may need to be successful, because everybody's going to pretend that they have until it's time that you don't have, and it's like, okay, like, what do you need? And then there would be somebody like me sitting there wanting and eagerly wanting to help, like, hey, how can I help? You don't have to fake anything anymore. Like, anything, the conversation that we got is going to stay here. It's literally about just how me and the school can help you be more successful. And we have access to resources, and being the dean just opened up the door to have more access and being able to have more access to help people, because where you can help. And it gives adults, you mean the parents and the student, a level of trust automatically, because you don't get to those positions as a dean of students or an administrator without already being a proven educator. So it gives more opportunity and gives you more space to be able to build that rapport with people, to be able to actually make a difference when it's needed.
So we also mentioned when we chatted, in setting up your interview tonight, we talked about Black History, and we do Black History 365. And I asked you who were the most influential people in your life and career in Black history. You mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Can you tell us, when did you first connect deeply with Black history?
I think I first connected deeply with Black history, I would say I had to be in high school. I was in high school, and there's some situations that was going on with grading, to be completely honest, with grading. And I always felt like I was a pretty intelligent person. Some of my friends always felt like they were pretty intelligent, and you could see a discrepancy in the way that some of the grading would go just because of bias alone. And it also, some of the things that you would be taught in high school, and or the lack thereof, and my family, we talk about Black history, black leaders and the prominent Black leaders and people that had shaped America and Black society to be what it is today. And when I'm learning stories, and you don't learn the complete truth in schools or anything like that. And it was in high school where I started having a calling to want to learn more about it, and when I was doing more due diligence and just being intrigued on my own to want to learn this stuff, when I was learning more about Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King, it just resonated with me where, there's always times and places for both of those approaches, and I was somebody that was always leaned towards more Malcolm X just because it seemed more thrilling, I guess. And it was more action, I guess. And the aggressive tactics, and I'm not an aggressive person, but I do have a kind of aggressive mentality sometimes, and just the sports in me, it's just sometimes you just get tapped into it. It's like, oh, hold on, maybe I was a little too aggressive, but it was just the no nonsense with it, and by any means necessary, like, you're gonna respect me because you have no reason not to. I'm not gonna go out of my way disrespecting you, but I am going to demand some type of respect from you, because you're not just going to do anything that you want to me. That, like, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to be sitting at my house with the rifle peeking out the window. I'm not doing that, or like Malcolm X or anything. But at the same time, I absolutely resonated with that approach because I'm looking at Rodney King, I'm watching this stuff, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, that ain't, like, I don't think that could be me. Like I can't be up there getting sprayed in the face with water hoses. Like, I don't know. So, but then on the other side, I'm learning Dr. Martin Luther King, nonviolence, everything. I have a dream, and that resonated with me too, to be completely honest, because there are times where you have to win with your words. But at sometimes you have to win with your actions too. Like, if somebody's going to try to, do you wrong, you have to take action sometimes. Say, like, you're not going to do that. I'm not talking about fighting nobody or anything like that. But sometimes it's just standing up and speaking up for yourself. Like, hold on, I know what you just tried to do right there to me. Like, you thought you were going to try to pull a fast one right there. Here's what's going to happen. Don't ever do that again, because if you were to do something like that again, that's Malcolm X, right? But yeah, and like other Black prominent figures would be like my grandfather. A lot of people know who he is in Minnesota if you care about that type of stuff. If you care about sports, you care about equality, you care about diversity, equity, inclusion. If you don't care about it, then you probably never even heard my name or my grandfather's name before. But if you have, you do care about that stuff, most people would have some sort of idea. And I want to thank you for having me on the show. And it's been great. And about the Black history and all of that, I wish it was 365 and everybody would talk about it 365 days a year, because it should be, because a month, the shortest month, it's not enough, and people feel like they got to squeeze everything in to what it should be. And with the administration is right now, like, I'm kind of curious to see what Black history is going to look like this year, with
So what do Dr. King and Malcolm X represent to you personally?
Resiliency, and also trailblazers. Like, there's still work that has to be done. And what it means to me is, they were the trailblazers, the ones that started the work, that kind of put it on the map to make it real for everybody, to be like, okay, this is a problem in terms of inequities, in terms of segregation, in terms of police brutality, in terms of socioeconomics, in terms of redlining. Like, you could go forever. I feel like with those two, that's when people finally started to listen. Yes, there were people that came before them that were trying to do it, but for whatever reasons, I feel like those were the two that were kind of groundbreaking. And right now, there's still a lot of people that are doing the work, and I feel like it just needs to continue to be talked about, and it has to continue to be worked upon, because with the push of the administration now, they want us just to be an abysmal past of Black history. Like, there is no such thing as Black history. It's just American history, right? And that could be very dangerous.
So their philosophies shaped your leadership style.
Oh, how did it, you said? It shaped my leadership style of having the presence of mind of knowing when I have to kind of tap into what's on like the more passive or when I have to be more assertive, you know? So that's kind of where, you know, I draw from, where sometimes, you know, you have to take that MLK approach. You have to, if you want to see something done. And if you want to, you know, be able to bring people together to have the conversations that will be the catalyst of the change. And other times there's, you know, situations where you just got to go do something like what Malcolm X is and does is stands up for more of the, you know, more of the action and not being as passive, you know. So it kind of allowed me to be able to understand and look at situations to navigate them and know what approach I'm supposed to take or which approach I feel like would be most effective. So that's where I lean into them. And when I'm talking to students, talking about, you know, equality and standing up for yourself and understanding that people will try to do you bogus, you know, and you're going to have to stand up for yourself at some point in time and even have to maybe stand up for other people. But first, you know, you would want to start off with standing up for yourself and not letting anybody do anything wrong by you, you know, and make sure that when, if you can and you have the opportunity to let people know that your expectation is that you're going to do right by me because I'm going to do right by you.
So, in closing, what are some words of wisdom and encouragement do you have for our audience? How they can connect with you via your social media, they can check out your websites, all of those good things that you like for them to know.
Yeah, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name Terrell McMoore. Also, I have an Instagram. You know, it's what is it? HD underscore visions. That's it. High definition visions. That's the name of it. Insight is don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't do it. Like, let me be the one to tell you that you can absolutely do it. That would be the insight for you. You know, a lot of people get tickled by smashing other people's dreams. I want to be somebody to let you know that you can absolutely do it. If you put your mind to it, you create a plan for yourself and you stick to that plan, you can achieve your goals. And if you need a coach or you need somebody to help, you know, create a strategic plan or anything like that, I'll be happy to help you. You know, I don't, you know, it's something that I love doing. And it doesn't have to be around athletics. It can be around education. It can be around business development. It could be around anything that you want. You know, if you know that there's some diversity, equity, inclusion type of work that needs to be done, I'm a person that you could lean on in terms of restorative practices. I I am certified to do restorative practices within Minnesota, at least, and I don't know if it's nationwide or not. It might be, but around restorative practices and yeah, just excited if you know any of what I've said resonated with you or what me and CZ's been talking about. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm an open book. I respond. I'm pretty responsive, and I just want to help. To be completely honest, if you feel like there's a way that I can help you, your business, an athlete, a program, whatever it may be, feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to connect with you.
Before I close, I just want to tell you, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here, and we definitely got to have you back. So we'll have to chop it up on that so we can get you back.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because I really do appreciate you being here, and you know that was some really good insight that you left here with the audience for tonight. Tonight, we are reminded that leadership is not a title; it's a calling. It's the quiet work, the unseen work, the hard work. Terrell McMoore stands as a testament to what happens when a man chooses purpose over ego, service over spotlight, and humanity over hierarchy. His journey from the field to the classroom to the front lines of equity work is more than a career path, it's a blueprint for courage, a blueprint for transformation, a blueprint for what it means to lead with dignity in a world that often forgets its value. As we close this episode of American Black and White, may we carry this with us, the reminder that justice is a daily practice, inclusion is a choice, and leadership is an act of love. Thank you, Terrell, for your voice, your vision, and your unwavering commitment to building a world where every person can stand fully in their humanity. And thank you, family, for joining us tonight. Until the next time, stay bold, stay rooted, and stay in fight and flight as we close this episode. And we will see you guys tomorrow night as we have our third Final Word Friday show. Thank you again, Terrell. And we'll definitely have to have you back, and I'll be chatting with you later. And you guys have a great evening. We'll see you all.